Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Today we begin by talking about Oklahoma's #1 crop, winter wheat, and the newer rotational crop that came along 10 years ago that's helping wheat to flourish. For more on the science behind it all, here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon.
One of our main crops and what's in the ground right now is going to be wheat, and we deal in that particular crop with a lot of wintertime weeds, which is going to be different than many of the weeds we deal with in corn and soybean.
Italian ryegrass and feral rye are the two biggest yield robbers that we have out there.
The problem that we were facing is that our wheat was being refused from elevators. We had lots of grassy weed trash in our wheat, and therefore we were spreading those things around whenever wheat was going from the elevator back out into the fields.
And they are just very, very difficult to manage without a rotational crop.
Early on, Dr. Pieper was starting to hit some dead ends on some of these options for controlling some of these winter annual grassy weeds. What few options we had for some of these grasses were starting to get limited each year.
Back in 2004, researchers with Oklahoma State University's Weed Sciences Department asked 10 wheat growers across the state to grow little black seeds like these in areas where they were having problems with weeds. Well, they did, and the crop that came up looked like nothing that they'd seen before. But those plants would be the first step in controlling weeds that they had fought for years.
Well, especially in the fall and winter, we probably get the most confusion. We've had communities go out and try to dig up turnips. People think it's cabbage, but those yellow fields in April definitely bring a lot more smiles, which is very good.
This is canola.
And so canola was the introduction of a broadleaf crop that could be rotated with wheat in the wintertime.
We can control our grassy weeds, and we can also get a yield bump from the rotation effect from the winter canola.
Cleaning up those wheat fields has definitely helped the wheat industry in Oklahoma have a better product to market. And we have a lot of guys that are starting to grow seed wheat, and they're having a year to rotate to canola, clean up those wheat fields, and have a break in between the wheat varieties as if they switch wheat varieties. So there's a lot of different facets, but most of all, it's been very successful in cleaning up fields.
Canola is not a magic seed. Producers still have to spray for weeds. It's just a different set of weeds.
When you're trying to control problem grassy weeds such as Italian ryegrass, feral rye, cheat in a grass crop such as wheat, it's really difficult because most of the chemistries that will kill the weeds will also kill the wheat. So introduction of a broadleaf crop such as winter canola that our producers could use much of the same equipment they already have to produce it was great for our wheat crop.
Some of the biochemical pathways are a little bit different between broadleaves versus grasses, and that allows us to have selective chemicals that would control grasses over broadleaves or vice versa.
Industry personnel throughout Oklahoma kind of study the impact some of these rotations have helped the Oklahoma producer. We have some showing, 85 to 95% reduction in their dockage on their wheat the following year after canola. If
we want to increase our wheat yields in the state of Oklahoma, we are simply going to have to start rotating more, and winter canola will allow us to do that. And I think our production from the state as a whole, our wheat production, will actually increase in spite of those acres that are coming out of wheat and going into canola. We know having a crop rotation, having a broadleaf to rotate to is definitely an excellent option for the Oklahoma wheat producer.
And canola's been a pretty good crop in Oklahoma the past couple of years, but Kim, let's talk about the numbers. How has canola worked?
Well, canola prices have been trending down. You know, you go back 2 years, we was in the $12, $13 bushel canola area. You come back to this last year, $9, $10, mostly $10, $10.50, something like that. We were predicting $8.50 for June of 2015. Doesn't look like we're going to get that. If I understand correctly, canola prices are down below $8. Of course, nobody has any canola to sell, so that's no big deal. Hopefully those prices will come back up before we get into harvest.
Okay, kind of staying in that neighborhood, $6 wheat, let's talk about what that means for Oklahoma.
Yeah, the wheat prices are just walling around. Yeah, on that March contract or the December contract, we roll to the March. It just can't get away from 6. This week, those wheat prices were $5.84 to $6.12. You've got the upper limit at 620. You got the lower limit at 560. It's got to break those two to either start an uptrend or a downtrend. So until we do that, we've essentially got a sideways pattern in wheat from 580 to 620. Now, some excitement this week in wheat was the French are shipping us a shipload, a cargo of wheat. It's soft red winter wheat. It's going into the feed market. It's very poor quality. It's not going to have any impact at all on hard red winter wheat prices, except psychologically. And I think that's part of the reason we hammered it down there for a little while. Just, hey, we're importing wheat. On imports, our exports, if you're looking at that demand, the WASDE is predicting 21% decline in exports from last year on all wheat. Right now it's down 26%. So lack of demand there. Hard red winter wheat, the market, the WASDE or USDA is predicting 28% less than last year. We're 38% less than last year. So our problem right now is we just don't have sufficient demand for our wheat. Until we do, we're going to wallow around.
Okay, let's go into the corn markets. The prices are kind of slipping on that one also.
Well, we had an uptrend going in corn, you know, and that was good for producers that had corn to sell and bad for the producers that need to buy feed, but we broke that uptrend. We broke it at $3.90 on the March contract. It's got support at $3.70. We break that, we could get a downtrend. If you're going up, you got to break $4. You know, the market's got a lot to chew on right now, including that French wheat coming into this market. You say, well, why? Why do we need feed wheat when we got all this corn? Because it's cheap. It just shows how poor the quality of wheat was in France and Germany because of poor weather at harvest. And you've got the higher value of the dollar that lowers that French wheat. You know, it lowers it 50 to 60 cents a bushel, and you can bring it in the U.S. cheaper than you can buy corn.
Okay, soybeans.
They broke that downtrend too. Sounds like a broken record, doesn't it? You got the beans. You know, they broke that uptrend at 10.20. It's got support at $10. If it breaks that, it can run on down to $9.50. We're talking about the January contract here. To continue the uptrend, though, that bean prices got to go above $10.50. With the big bean harvest, with the big corn harvest, with no wheat demand, I really don't see any of these prices going up anywhere near in the future.
Well, maybe there'll be some movement next week. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
The cold winter weather that we experienced this last week gives us a reminder that the nutritional requirements of cows out on range increase whenever there's a cold weather event that takes place this or any other winter. As I look through the scientific literature on that subject, there is a classic old experiment that was done at Kansas State University back in the early 1980s. And they looked at adjusting the cow ration for some cows that were in a dry lot situation, but they adjusted it according to what the wind chill was for those cows as they went through the winter. These were spring calvers, and what they did was increase the amount of energy that was available to the cows by 1% for each 1 degree that the average wind chill was going to be below 32 degrees. And so let's give an example. If the wind chill was going to be about 12 degrees, then they knew that was 20 degrees lower than that 32, and so they would increase the supplement by about 20%. What they found when they did that particular experiment was by adjusting that winter supplement, they had those cows in better body condition at calving time, and that they weighed more at calving time due to the fact that they had lost less body condition. In this particular experiment, those cows gained 115 pounds during the last 4.5 months of gestation, compared to the cows that didn't get the adjustment, only gaining 26 pounds. Well, when you consider that the conceptus, the weight of the baby calf, the weight of the fluids is going to be very near that 115 pounds, that means that those other cows were losing body condition going towards calving. That's something we do not want. That resulted then, when they went and checked how those cows did the following breeding season, they had a much higher percentage of the cows that had their ration adjusted during the course of the winter, cycling at the start of the breeding season, 82%, compared to only 65% of the cows that were kept on the same ration throughout the cold winter weather. And as they followed and found out when those cows were rebred, there was a 10-day advantage on the average for the cows that were had their ration adjusted during that cold winter weather. Those cows reconceived 10 days earlier. That meant the next year then that their calves were going to be bigger, heavier, and more uniform than the corresponding cows that had the ration kept just exactly the same. Also, they found that those cows the following year were in better body condition going into the winter than their counterparts that were still left on that regular same diet all the way through the winter weather. Bottom line from all of this to me is that we can make some slight adjustments. If we hear that there's going to be a cold winter weather event coming our way, we can adjust the amount of the supplement that we give these cows and be able to do a better job of maintaining body condition on these cows throughout the course of the winter. I think in the long run it'll pay off in terms of better calf crop and better rebreeding performance of those cows the next year. We hope this is helpful to you, and we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Joining us now is Jody Campeacci, our Ag Policy Specialist. And Jody, you and the team have been crisscrossing the state with these Farm Bill meetings the past few weeks. What are you hearing most from producers?
I think probably the most important question that I've been asked is, okay, what do I need to do? What do I need to read? What do I need to learn? So what I've been recommending is go to attend some of the meetings if you can, attend more than one meeting if you can. Some of the main questions are for the base reallocation and the yield update option. Who makes that decision? And so a lot of producers have been asking that, is it the owner, is it the producer? We go into a lot of detail at the meetings, and also a lot of the information on the FSA website that can be read goes into a lot of detail as well about who makes what decision, as well as the ag risk coverage, ARC, or PLC price loss coverage election. We've had a lot of questions on that too, of who makes the decision if you're in a share rent situation, if you're a cash lease, if you have power of attorney. So there's lots of questions that producers have been asking, and those who have been attending the meetings have really gotten a lot of those questions answered.
Now, in terms of this FSA letter that was sent out, what do you want to tell people about that?
So earlier this summer in July and August, FSA sent out a letter to all producers that the first sheet was an actual letter. The second sheet had some tables showing the base history, the base acreage for each farm, and then the planted acreage history. Also the yield update, the yield that producers will have the opportunity to update, the old yield is actually on that letter. So I've been asking, a lot of people have it or misplaced it or just not quite sure what they did with it. So what I would recommend is going to their local FSA office and just asking to get that information, because it will really help whenever producers go to use the decision tools and to look at whether they want to update yields, whether they want to reallocate base, and choosing ARC versus PLC.
It's sort of your starting blueprint. Does that seem
yes.
accurate? Now, in terms of the tools that are available, the FSA website is pretty comprehensive for those wanting to start doing their homework.
Yeah, the Oklahoma FSA website, they have a link to the 3 decision tools. There's, of course, the Oklahoma State, Kansas State one. There's also 2 other web-based tools, and there's a link to all of those. There's also a link to just some really helpful information about, what things do producers need to think about? How do you go about making the ARC versus PLC election? And I highly encourage everyone to go there and just start looking at it. There's plenty of time to make the decisions, and I don't encourage anyone to just run out right away and make it, but you want to get a little bit prepared because some of the stuff can be a bit confusing.
Now, in terms of the extension meetings, there's some left the rest of this year, which we are showing on the screen. But it's okay if you need to attend more than one, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've had quite a few producers who've actually attended more than one, and it really helps, by the time you hear it a second time, you really start to kind of understand, okay, this is what they're talking about. We'll also have, going into the first of the year, OSU Extension will be having meetings where we'll bring out computer labs and just really help producers kind of work through some of the decision tools. I know we have a lot of producers who, don't use computers and just aren't really that familiar with it, but OSU Extension will be able to help as long as they bring in some of the information, especially on that FSA letter, and also some of their crop insurance yield history. That'll help a lot as we work through the tools.
So in the meantime, track down those letters.
Yes.
Okay, Jody Campeacci, our Ag Policy Specialist, thanks a lot. And for the links to the information Jody mentioned, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Last week we watched the cold roll in. This week we watched it roll out. A map of maximum afternoon air temperatures for Tuesday, November 18th shows the cold departing to the east. Over the western three-quarters of Oklahoma, all of the afternoon highs made it into the 50s, the green map areas. In the northeast, the map colors are blue, with daytime highs for Tuesday in the 40s. Miami, at the northeast corner of our state, only hit 41 degrees. Those afternoon highs really look good when you consider that Tuesday morning started off with some very cold spots in the state. In the west, Beaver hit a morning low of 8 degrees. Over in the east, Nowata, Bonita, and Miami all started off the morning with 8-degree lows. The warmest spot on Tuesday morning was Medicine Park with a low of 26 degrees. A graph of air temperature for Beaver from late Friday night through Wednesday evening shows a warm Saturday hitting 50 degrees, a cold Sunday only reaching 26 degrees. Monday morning dropped to 4 degrees and then climbed above freezing in the afternoon to 36. Tuesday was when it really warmed up, a 47-degree rise in just under 9 hours between 6:35 a.m. and 3:15 p.m. The cold was out of the state Wednesday afternoon. There were no afternoon highs in the 40s. The coolest high temperature was 51 degrees at Boise City. The highest maximum air temperature for Wednesday was 64 degrees at Bernieville. Along with warmer temperatures, Wednesday evening was a calm one. We don't often see wind maps when the highest wind in the state, measured at the top of the Mesonet's 33-foot tall tower, is 11 miles per hour. That happened Wednesday at 6 p.m. Only 2 sites, Kenton and Pawnee, had 11-mile-per-hour winds. The pale green areas across the state had wind speeds between 5 and 10 miles per hour. The pale blue areas had winds below 5 miles per hour. Coming down the Mesonet Tower to head height, the highest 2-meter wind speeds were 6 miles per hour at Kenton. Winds were so calm at the 2-meter level, 49 Mesonet sites reported 0 wind speed out of Mesonet's 120 locations at 6 p.m. The soil temperature average at 4 inches under vegetation for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday ranged from a low of 38 degrees at Kenton to a high of 51 degrees at Ringling. Looking at rainfall for the current water year from October 1st to November 18th, Oklahoma is split. The green and blue areas are above normal. The yellow areas had less than 80% of their normal rainfall. The orange areas less than 60%. We hope you get the rain you need soon. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Joining us now is Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist. And Daryl, we got our first blast of winter in Oklahoma this past week, as well as other parts of the country. How has that impacted cattle markets?
Well, I'm not sure that it had a big impact on feeder cattle markets for the most part. In a few cases, it did cause some disruption of cattle moving to auction, but probably not a big impact on prices generally speaking. For the fed cattle markets, I think there might have been a bit more impact. There was enough disruption in movement of cattle out of the feedlot into the packing plants, caused some, a bit of concern about available supplies, and pushed fed cattle prices actually to a new record high. We saw some fed cattle traded during that period as high as $1.72 for live cattle trade.
Let's look specifically a little closer at feeder cattle. What's the situation there?
We're kind of in the middle of or maybe towards the end of the fall run. They're still reporting fairly heavy volumes of feeder cattle, particularly in the northern plains. And there it appears that the markets might be a little bit, topping out just a bit. They're trading a bit uneven, sort of up and down depending on specific circumstances. In the southern plains, we've continued to see prices strengthen pretty well. And really across the south in general, there's still quite a bit of demand for cattle to go out on winter grazing, and with the supplies that we have, these markets have remained very firm through this period.
And then are we seeing similar situation with fed cattle? How's that looking?
Well, again, we did see a record high price as, partly as a result of the cold, but underneath that, we've still got fundamentally tight supplies. Again, if we do see some production impacts as a result of the cold, it'll continue to keep this market tight. And so it's really made packers scramble a bit to find cattle. They're squeezed pretty heavily right now with a box beef market that has been a little reluctant to go up, though we have seen some slow strength there, but the fed cattle prices have outpaced that. So it's kept packers on the defensive here and squeeze their margins. Feedlots are sort of keeping up with their break evens at this point, and they're about at break even, so not losing money yet, but moving ever closer to higher break evens that will be a challenge to meet as we go forward.
And then in terms of the big picture across the U.S., how are we looking there?
Well, at this point, we're still expecting beef production to be down 5.5% or maybe a little bit more than that, 5.5% for the year. That's a pretty big year-over-year change. Cattle slaughter so far this year is down over 7%. The feedlot steers and heifers are down about 5.5% in terms of slaughter levels. The cow market, of course, has continued very, very tight all year, and especially this fall, even with the sort of seasonal increase in slaughter, but it's still down 20% in the last month or so, year over year. And so when it's all said and done, we're going to continue to see tighter supplies, in 2014. And as we look ahead to 2015, we're anticipating a further tightening of supplies as these feeder cattle supplies will continue to get tighter, at least, through 2015 and into 2016.
It seems we've been talking about it a long time, but it just continues.
It does continue, and in some sense, we're really just getting started. In fact, we won't have the data until early next year to really confirm what happened in terms of herd expansion. It's pretty clear from the other indicators that we will see some level of expansion, but we don't know how much. And more importantly, we don't know what the weather holds for us next year and whether we can sustain that herd expansion. So, if we can, we're at the beginning of a fairly long process that'll play out over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist.
So we're in an ungrazed pasture. So this particular area was not grazed by livestock at all. And you can see, even after the drought for the past couple of years, it's achieved some really good growth. And part of the reason for that is that the previous years it wasn't heavily grazed. And what I mean by that is that as we look down to the leaf area and the leaves that are in it, as opposed to the reproductive heads, these leaves that are here, they are pretty vigorous, and as you can see, they're starting to change their color now for the winter. And so they're breaking down those nutrients and translocating those into their below ground storages. And so what we really want to be cautious about is how much vegetation, how much of that above ground growth can we remove through the course of the growing season. Here we've removed none, but in a native pasture that's grazed, we really want to be careful to follow at least a really simple rule. If you don't want to calculate that stocking rate really closely, the rule can be just take half, leave half. But that take half does not mean your animals are consuming half of that vegetation. Instead, you have to account for their trampling, their bedding, defecation, urination, and also wildlife use, because you don't just want to gain growth of livestock and grow wildlife. You really have to be cautious and protect those native plants. And so they need some of that above ground growth remaining at the end of the season so that they can move those nutrients down into their roots, store over winter, have some of that above ground growth to protect them from winter kill, and then also have those nutrients stored below ground so that the following season they're able to emerge and regrow from those below ground organs and produce a really good growth for you that following season.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a nice week, everyone, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.